Knights at the Round Table, a round table discussion on speculative fiction books and film. Hi everybody and welcome back to Knights at the Round Table. Today we are discussing the book Drawing Blood. I forgot to write down the author by
Poppy Z. Brite.
Thank you. I'm sitting at the table here with Nathan, and I'd like to start with general impressions of the book. Nathan?
So, Drawing Blood, and especially Poppy Z. Brite as a writer, were really instrumental in my youth, in my teenage years, finding myself as a queer person, and later as a queer man. It turned out that Poppy Z. Brite is also a trans man, and I found that out recently. I think he came out in the late 2010s, so it's fairly recent. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a book that kind of helped me find myself. I've read it hundreds of times, especially when I was a teenager and everything. I hadn't read it for at least 10 years when I picked it up again, and I listened to it on audio this time around. And there's a couple of things that didn't age so well in that book, but overall I still think it was a really thoroughly enjoyable experience for me.
So this is my first reading of the book. Thank you for lending it to me, by the way. And I liked it well enough. Romance really isn't my genre, and this really does feel like The Shining, but if it was a queer romance.
It's true. It's primarily a haunted house book,
yeah,
but it has a very strong romance thing. And one of the things that I was
I would go the other way.
Yeah?
I find it primarily a romance that has a slight haunted house element.
Oh, it's not slight.
I mean, you're halfway through the book before anything supernatural happens.
That's not true.
Yeah, it is.
The hammer materializes like in the first...
halfway through the book.
Yeah, it's true. Because there's a lot of but there's no romance leading up to there though either. Because the hammer materializes before they
meet. Yes, yeah. Okay, that's true. There's a lot of setup.
There's quite a lot of setup.
Yeah. Which actually I appreciated.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said for setting the mood of a book. And I really enjoyed... I don't even know if it was chapter 1 or if it was the prologue. But double murder suicide.
Yeah.
Which...
It's the prologue. Well, it's the prologue in the first... I think probably 2 or 3 chapters. Because it kind of, it goes on.
It goes on a bit. But I really... it starts off with a family in crisis hurtling down a road in a town... or it starts off with a town, actually, descriptions of the town.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated it because it drew me into that world really effectively. Mm-hmm. There's a lot to be said for it, I think. I don't think you always need to jump right into the action, which seems to be quite popular in writing now.
No, and this book is set... It's not a sequel to, but it's set in the same town that Poppy Z. Brite's first book was, which is... Lost Souls.
Okay, so Lost Souls is also set in Missing Mile?
Yeah, it's set in Missing Mile, and they talk about Ghost and Steve a little bit in this book. They were the main characters of that former book.
Oh, okay.
And it's funny because there's a scene in that book where they discuss going to the murder house.
Oh, really?
And they don't talk about it much more than that. It's just it's a murder house and it's obviously haunted and Ghost doesn't want to go in because he's psychic and he can sort of feel that something is terribly wrong with that house. But yeah, it's kind of fun to see the story of the murder house.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so if anybody follows me on Facebook, I finished the prologue and all I wrote on Facebook was, holy shit.
Yeah. It spares no detail.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Very, very matter of fact. This was my first reading of this book as a parent. And as a parent of kids who are almost exactly the ages of
Dee Dee and Trevor. Ooh.
It was a brutal, brutal shock to me to reread. I know this story through and through. And yet, rereading it, I was feeling as a parent going oh my god, these poor kids, poor kid Trevor, kids. Holy crap. I cannot imagine what makes you go. And I'm an artist too, I'm a comic book artist too, and this is why it was so important for me in my life. It touched so many areas of my life as a teen who was like seeking out my place in the world. But yeah, I can't imagine what makes you go and smash your loved ones' heads in with a hammer.
Yeah.
Like, what makes you poison your children and kill them in their sleep by smashing their heads? Like, it's not like a, you know, like a clean murder. It's a very brutal way to go.
Oh my god. I can't remember her name now, but the mom.
Rosina.
Rosina. Oh my god. Oh my god. The descriptions of her injuries before her death were really brutal. And
it comes up quite a lot in the book because Trevor, the main character, has kept their autopsy reports. He owns nothing else in the world but what's in his backpack, and part of it is his whole family's autopsy reports, which he rereads and rereads and rereads obsessively.
Which, I mean, I'm not sure I would be all that different if that was what happened to me as a kid. Like, Jesus. Yeah. It was brutal, really brutal. And I appreciate that it showed the brutality of it.
Absolutely.
I don't think it's something you necessarily have to gloss over just because it is brutal. I mean, you have to... I think part of it is you have to understand just how entirely damaged Trevor is when you meet him again at 25. Which, I mean, this prologue does brilliantly. I can't imagine having survived that.
Yeah.
Oh god, it was... But it set the scene really well!
And not just having survived, but being the only one who is completely untouched by it. Like, he wakes up at 5 years old, and he finds in the hall his mother brutally murdered, blood everywhere, brains leaking out of her head, and then he walks into his little 3-year-old brother's room to find his head bashed in and exploded all over the pillow, and then his father hanging in the bathroom, and like, he spends his entire life kind of wondering, well, why did I get left behind? Not just like, why was I spared, or like, he keeps thinking that his father loved his family enough to take them with him, but not him.
Which is actually kind of a reasonable sort of question to have. Like,
yeah.
Why me? Why am I alive? Why didn't you take me with you? Yeah. I mean, Trevor's questioning of what happened was entirely believable. It felt real. It felt like something that somebody who went through that shit would have gone through, would be asking. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That said, there were a couple of things in the book that made me go, ah.
There were a couple of them, yeah.
I have two really big ones. One, the idea that if you love someone enough, you can save them or change them. I really hate that trope.
See, I didn't, and I still don't read it as that trope. For me, being in a relationship with someone who is severely mentally ill, and having gone through a period of my life where my mental illness symptoms were extreme as well, I can really appreciate the balancing act that loving someone who can be violent and unpredictable can be. And like the first...
Yeah, no, I get that, but then in the end, it's fixed.
Well, it's fixed not because of the love necessarily, but because Zach goes in there to like try to help Trevor out of his thing. Zach never is the instrument of Trevor's salvation. Trevor is the instrument of his own salvation. Okay, you know what?
Yes, I will give you that. The whole it's a choice thing.
It's absolutely a choice.
But, I mean, Trevor would never have gotten to that point unless there was Zach.
Probably not. He goes in there to die. It's very, very obvious from the very first that he is living his last moments. He has decided that he's going back to this house to try and figure out maybe why he was left behind and then join his family.
To go to Birdland, as it was.
Exactly. And I don't see Zach as being there to like save him and that his love is the force that saves him, but Zach gives him a reason to hold on, which, having been deeply suicidal myself and having been with someone who goes through intense periods of like suicidality, I don't think that me being there and loving my wife is what saves her from her mental illness, but rather I'm the reason that she's still here because we happen to be together.
Right. Okay, you know what? That's fair. Yeah, I'll give that to you.
And rereading it through that lens of like having gone through all that, which I hadn't when I first read it, it really drove that home to me. And if it had been even slightly different, if Zach had gone to Birdland and gotten Trevor out of it, I definitely would have had the same read as you, and it would not have impacted me as profoundly. But because Trevor saves himself and makes that decision because he's decided that he wants to live after all, because he's discovered joy in the world, that to me read very differently than the trope.
Which is totally legitimate. Yeah. The other one is the tortured artist.
Yeah.
That, I mean, you have to go through some sort of torture in order to become an artist, or because you're an artist, you're naturally just tortured and it just...
But they talk about that, though. They have conversations. They have a conversation between, like, Trevor and Zach where they're talking about, like, you know, he didn't lose his art because Bobby, Trevor's father, was a comic book artist. And then Trevor goes on to also be a comic book artist. And they're talking about how pain maybe is something that makes you go through, and art is something that helps you go through the pain and everything. But Bobby, when he's going through his whole shit and when he's most tortured, he actually can't create anymore.
Yeah, but the lack of his creation is what drives him over the edge.
It is what drives him over the edge. But admittedly, he had other problems. Like, they had no money. They had, like...
Yeah, but see, that was all due to the fact that he could no longer create, right? So he could no longer sell his comics.
In Trevor's perspective.
Yeah, but that's the perspective that you're given.
It's the perspective that you're given until that conversation between Trevor and Zach, when Zach tells him, well, maybe he just lost his fucking sense of humor. Have you ever thought about that? And Trevor's perspective on that starts to change. He starts to think that, yeah, maybe making art and having pain are not related after all. And you know, when at the... Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, but at the end, like, Trevor credits Birdland, this place of pain and suffering, for his art, for him being able to be talented in the first place.
And yet he also recognizes it as the thing that bleeds artists dry, and he decides that he's not going to pay into it. Two things. He breaks his hand.
That's true.
He breaks his hand to break out of this cycle. He's like, well, you know what? If being an artist means being in pain, I don't want this anymore. And he actually physically, he smashes his hand repeatedly.
His drawing hand, which he's been so careful with.
Exactly. Where he gets into fights in the orphanage, and he learns how to fight with his left hand to preserve his right hand, because his right hand is his artist hands, is his connection to his father and his family. And he breaks out of that cycle, and it's a symbolic break, as well as a real one, because he can't draw anymore with that hand. And in the epilogue, they're very, very, like, he's starting to draw again, and he's realizing now that it's not connected to pain after all. And it doesn't have to be, suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. Still, when he credited, like, Birdland for his talent, I got my back up. I understand art being a vessel through which you can process pain, but I don't think trauma or pain are necessary for the creation of art. I really don't think that's what this book was I really don't think that's what this book was trying to say, because when he goes to Birdland, and he thought Birdland was this place, and it was like gonna be like a catharsis for him, and it turns out Birdland is nothing. Birdland is a land of has-been. It's a land of junkies. It's a land of, like, junkies literally feeding off of the blood of artists. It's a land of failure. And it's a land that doesn't belong to him at all, even anymore. Yeah, I think in the end, Birdland is his father's.
It is. And his whole thing was trying to get back. He was trying to be his father at the same time as he was trying not to be. And I think he just, like, finally broke out of this. One of the things that really drives it home for me that it's not this trope is when they're in the house, and you know he's drawing this comic about Charlie Parker, and he ends it a certain way, and he draws and he draws and he draws until he falls asleep, and then I think the next day or the day after that, he finds all of his comic strip basically
shreds.
In shreds, in confetti all around him. The house has taken his comic and has shredded it, and it's gone. And he feels like really frustrated with that. But then a couple of days later, or a day later, the timeline is blurry in my mind, he actually gets a phone call from one of the magazines he was thinking about submitting to, that his comic has been accepted, and that, the editor loves the ending where the cops are like beating up, and then it wasn't the way that he had finished his comic. The house actually changed his art, and that to me really drove home.
Wait, did it?
Yeah, it did.
Because I remember him saying that the ending was the zombified musicians and the rest of the town burning cops on crosses. And then that was the same way I remember reading.
But that wasn't the way that he meant to end it.
No, but that's
the house took control of his drawing.
Oh, right, yes. But then he liked it well enough.
He liked it well enough, but it's surrendering control. This is not my art.
Right.
This was always his father's art. And whether he was conscious of it or not, he was trying to be exactly like his dad, listening to the same music, doing the same kind of drugs, avoiding the drugs that made him not create, doing everything like his dad. Didn't
he say that his father's stuff was always slightly more upbeat than the stuff that he drew, though?
No, I think he was talking about Crumb.
No, I know. Well, yes, there was a lot of mention of Crumb, but I'm so sure that... Because they talked about how his own drawings sort of looked a lot like his dad's, but there was a lot more nuance to it, a lot more in the shading and the lining and stuff like that. But also, I remember distinctly reading that his father's art tended to be a little more cheerful than his own.
I think so, but I think he's talking about the period where he still sold. And then he started doing really dark, like more nitty-gritty and dark stuff, and he couldn't sell it anymore. And then, like, when he tried to sell that one last trip, and it couldn't sell because it was too dark, that's when he decided to kill his whole family.
Or it wasn't up to standard.
Up to his standard or whatever.
Up to standard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I just finished just reading this 2 days ago, and I guess it didn't hit me the same way.
Well, I mean, I reread it and reread it and reread it. Like, I must have read this... I exaggerate when I say 100 times, but I'm pretty sure it must have been at least 30 when I was a teen. So there's a lot of things that stick to me, and as an artist too. And I always thought, that art was pain and pain was art, and it was all the same. And rereading it, recently, I was just like, holy crap, this is not what it's about at all. But, the first time I read it, it definitely gave me that impression.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of nuance and subtleties in it too, like that a first reading might, that at least the first 10 times I read it, I didn't pick up on.
Oh yeah, fair enough.
There was another thing that I wanted to say and I forgot. Oh well.
I have a thing to say. I liked that the two main romantic leads were both men, and one of them was very clearly bi, and it made me happy because it wasn't treated as anything weird or special or their defining characteristic. It just was, and that is how you should write queer characters, please.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I also enjoyed Eddie. She was a great character.
She was, yes. I love that she was desperately in love with Zach.
Yeah.
And utterly heartbroken, but still ultimately there for her friend.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he was her friend, and she was gonna be there for him no matter what.
No matter what.
And I kind of really love that she was also, casually a sex worker, and there's no judgment. There's no,
Jinx again.
There's no morality attached to that. It's a job.
It's a job.
And if she does it well, she gets a lot of good pay. You know? And it was really good. The only thing that bothered me about characters was, all the black people in this book are Rastafarians, and they're super high all the time, and I was
Smart ganja.
Okay, I didn't notice that the first time.
I didn't notice that
quite
this
few times.
time.
Well, I didn't notice it until I read it right now, and I was like, okay, well, it was 92.
On the bright side, I mean, our two heroes end up happy in Jamaica.
Yeah. Yeah.
Poor Zach can't get a tan.
Those poor guys.
Yeah. Again, 92.
Jamaica, isn't it illegal to be gay in Jamaica?
I have no idea.
I'm fairly certain it's one of the places they recommend not visiting for homosexual couples.
Oh, yeah.
I don't even know that.
I have
That shows you how much interest I have in traveling.
To Jamaica specifically. I have a lot of
generally.
interest in traveling.
Yeah.
Anybody want to pay for a horse riding trip through Mongolia for me? Alright, done with that nonsense. So yeah, I love the way that these queer characters were written just as people, and their queerness was incidental rather than everything about them. Which...
Yeah, and there was no, like, issue with the queerness, you know, like, at some point, they're in Redneck County, they're in, like, North Carolina and everything, and they're, like, in a small town, and at some point, there's, like, a truck that goes by, and they call them faggots, and that's it.
Yeah, thugs! And then they drive off, and then they're both like, well, we should get out of here before they decide to come back and beat us up.
Yeah. But they don't get beat up, and they don't, like, you know, all of the people they meet and get friends with, nobody makes a big deal out of it, they're just like, oh, I guess they're a couple now. That's weird.
Yeah. I do like Calvin.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Pretty boy from the band who's not used to being rejected.
Yeah.
That was funny.
Kinsey was one of my favorite characters.
I loved Kinsey!
He's so great.
He's a lovely human.
He's like a car mechanic that didn't give the family a hard time with their old car broke down at the side of the road, and they were obviously like super poor and could not afford anything. And then he takes in Trevor without really knowing who he is and like helps him. Just generally, he's just this guy who's like, oh, you have a need, let me fill it.
Yeah.
You know, like, I want to help all the youngs. And he starts, like, this pub that makes basically no money just so that the young teenagers have a place to go.
Yeah. And occasionally get jobs and...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. He's a good soul. He's such a lovely person.
Even he finds his cashier with her hands down the till, and she's robbing the place, probably because she wants Coke, and he's still like, oh, just, like, leave.
Take your last paycheck and go.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it didn't end up well for her.
Unfortunately.
Nope. She died in a wreck.
Yeah. But he tried.
Yeah, and he was
heartbroken to hear that she was in a wreck. You know, like he's just a stand-up guy.
Yes. It was nice to see people in the South painted other than the horrific stereotype that you're so used to seeing Southern people.
Yeah, definitely. No, they were just like people.
They were just
people. Yeah.
Have to say though, when I first met Zach, didn't like him.
No, me neither.
He grew on me.
He did. Well, you know, he is on his high horse of like, I'm the most powerful guy in the whole universe, and then he falls down hard. Very hard. And he's like, oh wait, crap, not everybody is just for my convenience.
Yeah.
And that's when you start liking him.
Yes, yeah, when he starts learning life lessons. He stops being a little shit.
Yeah.
I would like to have found out what happened to Agent Cover, however you say his name. Cover. I read it as Cover.
I read it as Cover too, and in the audiobook that I listened to, they kept saying Cover, and I was like, who's that? Oh yeah, it's Agent Cover.
Agent Cover. So Agent Cover, then I guess, if that's the way it's in the audiobook. I would like to find out what happened to him.
I know. He was funny.
He was so determined to get Zach, and then Zach vanishes.
Yeah.
What happened? You just have to tell me what happened.
He retired.
Yeah, he never got the White House detail.
No, never.
Retired, and he's got a little box of unsolved files.
Yes,
in his back room.
Also, it was so much fun reading a book about computer hackers, which was written and set in 1992. Like, you know, he's got this Nokia cellular phone, and it's sleek. So revolutionary. He's got a laptop with a modem built in. Excuse me. Oh, yeah.
That did make me smile.
It was pretty fun.
It was. Yes. I don't have much else to say about the book, really. I think the writing itself was quite good. I was drawn in. I really liked the scene setting that happened in the prologue. It helped draw me in. Yeah,
the descriptions were very evocative without being lengthy.
Yeah, without being purple.
Yeah, exactly.
which I am sometimes guilty of. But then there were also some really beautiful turns of phrase. I didn't write any of them down because I'm an idiot. But I do remember reading a couple of sentences and being like, that just sounds beautiful to the ear. So I was talking to a friend of mine, my kung fu brother, Gordon, and he calls it tongue dancing.
Oh man, I love this tongue dancing.
Tongue dancing, when you read something... Yeah, that's what I said. I said, when you say tongue dancing, I think of something different.
Well, yes, but also...
It's just when you read something aloud and it sounds so beautiful. It's like your tongue is dancing. Like it's a ballet act, but for your tongue. Anyway, I thought it was a beautiful turn of phrase, and there were certainly some sentences which inspired tongue dancing in this.
Oh yes, definitely.
Yeah. Ow, that was my knee. Crack. I'm 400 years old. God. Alright, so I guess we'll go with final thoughts and star rating then, unless there's something else that you want to add.
No, this book was always one of my favorite reads of all time. It definitely remains quite high up on that list. 4.5 out of 5.
Oh, wow, okay. It's not my favorite read of all time. I'm not sad I read it, though, because actually, to be honest, I don't have a lot of books with queer characters in them, and I certainly don't have many books at all with queer characters that are dealt so well as they are in this book. And I really enjoyed that about this book. But romance, again, is not my jam. I don't mind if it's part of the story. I do mind if it's the major part of the story, which it felt like to me this was. So, yeah, I'm giving it a 3.
That's okay. I have to say,
okay.
I have one last thing to say though.
Yes.
Reading it as a parent for the first time, especially with kids that are the age, like about the ages of Trevor and Dee Dee, I instead of identifying with Trevor as I quite did every time I read it before, I felt like Trevor's parents, and this was the very first time that I read it, and I was like, oh, there's a lot of sex and drugs in this book.
Yes, there is. Yeah, the sex I don't mind so much, but all the drugs, like,
I'm pretty sure this book was partially responsible for me starting to smoke weed. Pretty sure. Yeah. I
don't, so... There was a lot of it. It's like when you watch a movie from like the 50s or something, you're like,
there's a lot of smoking.
Has a cigarette.
Yeah.
What is going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it felt like to me.
A little bit, yeah, because everybody's smoking weed all the time in this book.
All the time. All right, you get to pick the next book. Oh dear God.
Fall of the Kings by Ellen Kushner and Delia Sherman.
I think I still have your copy.
You do have my copy.
Yes, finally make excuse
That's
to
okay, because I bought it on audio again.
Oh, okay. You will get it back when we do this panel, and now,
that is fine.
Now I can actually have a good excuse to sit down and read it, because
yes,
I haven't yet.
I think you'll enjoy it thoroughly.
I think
There's
so
a
too.
little bit of romance in that book,
I don't
but it's
care.
not the major part. The major part is definitely the history thing.
Okay, then then I'll enjoy that, yeah. Sorry to my romance reading friends. I don't judge you. I swear. Alright, so the next book Actually, we'll do it at the beginning of February, I think, because this is all start of the new season. Oh, wait! No! We are in the new season. Never mind. Next month's book will be Fall of the Kings. I need more coffee, clearly. God damn. If you have any thoughts or comments about Drawing Blood, do leave them in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe or follow us on Twitch. Thanks very much, guys. Bye!